Last year, we had a webinar where we had Mr. Jerome Goodluck as our resource person.
Was it interesting?
Did you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm just checking my own.
No. You can just repeat yourself now, what you said.
Good.
Good.
Where?
Marciana, please start.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. I welcome Ms. Marciana, our student volunteer of our Commerce Association. She will now deliver the formal welcome address. She will also introduce our resource person, Ms. Kate Cooper. We welcome you, Ms. Kate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kate Cooper, consultant, commentator, coach, and collaborator and managing director of Kate Cooper Limited. Following an academic career, Kate joined the UK's Institute of Leadership and Management as head of research policy and standards at where she shaped an innovation research program informing, inspiring, and impacting the practice of great leadership. She is a conference keynote speaker and provides expert commentary on a range of topics arising from the leadership agenda. She is regularly quoted in regional, national, and international media, has appeared on both BBC television and radio, and has a regular column in Dialogue Review, the business magazine for leaders. In addition to that, MBA from Cranfield University, Kate has various postgraduate qualifications in education and women's studies. She is a fellow of the Institute of Leadership and Management and Doctor of Management candidate at the University of Hertfordshire. We welcome you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
Marciana, please keep your camera on and talk to us.
Yes, ma'am, I've kept on.
So, would you like me to start?
Yes, it's your time now.
Yes, sure.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted, absolutely delighted when Dr. Thomas invited me to come today to talk to you. And I hope you find what I have to say interesting, because I was really interested in the title. The idea of accepting, adapting, and adjusting is absolutely what I believe about leadership. And if we go back to that lovely introduction I had from Marciana, when I left university, I joined the car industry, and I have to admit, I still love cars. I still care about all the new models, delighted to see all the new electric cars that are coming out. I'm waiting to get an electric one when the price becomes a good one. And then I moved into academia. I went then to a professional body. Now I own my own business. And all of my career, I think, I've been talking about leadership. When I was in the university, I had the real, pleasure of, I used to teach nearly always, mostly on our MBA programs. And we had students, because we were in London, coming from all over the world to study for their MBA, to think about management, to think about leadership when they were at the university in London. And most of them, I imagine, like you, combined their studying with some sort of part-time job, or perhaps they worked in the family business. So it was really important for them to make sense of what they were learning at the university with their daily experience. And one thing I would like to emphasize, and I can't emphasize this enough, that leadership, yes, I'm a leadership expert, but I believe leadership is for everybody, and everybody can be leading whatever they are. It's not about a job title. It's not about being really important and highly paid. It's really how you relate to people in a work environment. Because I think if we all think about any experiences in our life, we will have found occasions where we behaved like a leader, whether that was organising a family gathering, something to do with a sports team, a choir, something to do with your place of worship. It really doesn't matter the context. We often have opportunities to do leadership sort of things, and we don't congratulate ourselves enough for them. So having had that long career or different careers in different areas, I really recently started, since starting my own company, thinking about, well, what do I really understand leadership to be? And when Dr. Thomas said, come and talk to us, I thought, this is great. You know, this is so much what I understand leadership to be. This idea of accepting the situation you're in, adapting yourself, and just adjusting and just keeping on. It's a phrase I use a lot about keeping on, keeping on. So what I'm going to talk to today particularly is about that adapting, but in the context of becoming a leader and how one relates to other leaders and one's colleagues at work. And it doesn't always have to be at work. You know, we can learn about leadership, whether we're in a family situation, whether we're volunteering, or indeed when we're working in some sort of hobby. So I see leadership as being about the 3 R's. I think you've all heard of the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic, which we use in English, which of course arithmetic doesn't begin with R. But it's the basics. And to me, the basics of leadership are about starting with the reality, where you are, the context. Now, often I get asked, and I don't think I've ever been to a leadership seminar where somebody hasn't said something like, well, are leaders born or made? As though there's a leadership gene that you either have it or you don't have it. And what I found interesting is in all the years with working with so many different international students, and I've worked in China and in the Middle East, it often depends where you are as to how receptive you are to the idea of there being or not being a leadership gene. Now, I don't think there is a leadership gene. And those of you who follow perhaps Premiership football, certainly in the UK, or even I'm sure in your own leagues, the number of managers that are sacked and then go on to another club and do very well, well, if they really had a leadership gene, wouldn't they do very well wherever they were? If leadership was part of your personality, then you'd be great. You'd lead anything, anywhere. And we all know that that's not true, that sometimes you do great work and sometimes it's not so good. And you might all have seen leaders who you thought were terrific, and then you see them somewhere else and they're not as effective. Because where we're doing our leadership is really important, the reality of the situation that we find ourselves in. So I think the caution for me there is, don't think you're born a great leader. It's a work in progress. It's something that you might, through great experiences early on in life at school, where everything was going really well for you and your friends sort of looked to you to make decisions and all the rest of it, lead the way, if you like. What a great start. But if you didn't have that start, it really doesn't matter, because you can start working more and more on your leadership as you go through your career, starting, if you haven't started already, certainly starting from today. Because leadership, if we move round my circles to the left now, is also about relating. How can you lead, be led, work with people if you are not in relationship with them? Because leadership, it's a sport that involves more than one person. I'd love to speak to people who think that you can lead all by yourself and work on yourself in absolute isolation. But I don't believe that to be the case, because all the time when we're speaking about work, with people at work, or any tasks that we want to complete, we're in relationship with people. And the other thing I'm not really going to talk too much about today, but to me, the third R of leadership is delivering results. And this really is a great thing about contradicting the leadership gene idea, isn't it? Because if you are a great leader, you will deliver results. And that might be in spite of you not having the most charismatic personality or all the other things that we traditionally associated with leadership. But if ever you are talking about whether somebody's a great leader or not, think about what they've delivered. And that's when I'm not talking about, world figures. Like whenever I ask people about great leaders, they tell me about Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela. But to me, the best leadership lessons you can have is from looking at people that you know and that you really understand how they relate to other people and the results that they deliver in the context that they're in. So let's start with the reality. This is what is really going on. And what is going on is probably the reality. I've inserted the really there because I think sometimes we're not altogether honest about the situations that we find ourselves in. Now, a lot of my understanding of leadership, and it's come, of course, from being an academic, from doing research at the Institute, but also from having led teams myself, great big teams of academics who are traditionally tricky to manage, and also small project teams when we've been developing learning materials or courses or running big conferences, whatever it is. And I have sat in so many meetings where I want to say, depending on, who else is in the meeting, well, what's really going on here? Let's be honest about the situation that we find in ourselves. So in this screen on the left there, you'll see I've put things that are really going on. We've been talking briefly about, we're in a global pandemic. And although I'm sure you have in India, as we have in the UK, people who are pretending it's not really happening or refusing to accept the severity of the pandemic. But we cannot argue, I don't think, with the numbers of people, certainly here in the UK, that are getting infected. Economies are volatile, are they not? Whether or not we have a global pandemic, that certainly made it worse. I'm sure even far away in India, you will have heard of Brexit. That has had a real impact on our economy, but we don't know. Somebody was only saying today on the BBC, we can't really tell whether it's the pandemic that's affected the economy and supply chains or whether it's Brexit. But what we do know is there is a volatility. When we go to work, and this will happen when you do group work at college, we find ourselves with colleagues we didn't choose. That's the reality. Sometimes we have managers that we don't really think get us or aren't trying to get the best from us. I was talking earlier to your principal about how here in the UK, we have a constant complaint about our IT being unreliable. And as I said, our fantasy is that in India, this doesn't happen. In your car, everything works because you all understand it far better. But we have different sorts of broadband speeds and all the things, and your computer camera isn't working. That's our reality. Sometimes we have customers that really get on our nerves or irritate us. And I think whatever time we have, when we're trying to get things done, when we're trying to do tasks, we often feel we don't have enough. And any department budget, anybody who's tried to run any sort of event or any trip will always think, those of you who are in societies like Marciana was obviously representing your societies, you could always do with more money to get, to do things better. But what we tend to find, and this is what I got drawing on my experience of being in many situations, leading many projects, people talk about what's wrong, and then very quickly.
Okay, someone has to mute themselves.
Oh, sorry, I was muted, but I'm allowed to come back, I think. I'm all right now.
No.
What we tend to do is complain about the things on the left and then fantasize, make up things on the right, that we're going, the pandemic will end and that we'll get better. We'll get a better job, we won't have to work here, or we'll get great new markets, there'll be loads of people who hear about our products and services and suddenly start buying them, or if we work for a government agency, we'll get great grants. What will happen is something very different to what we've actually got, and we spend too much time thinking about what we'd like and not enough time managing the resources we've got. And that to me is absolutely about accepting. This is what it is. Let's crack on. Let's make the most of this. And it's only then we can then start thinking about relating, my second R. Now, this is a great friend of mine, a brilliant professor, a management philosopher, Professor Charles Hampden Turner. And he used to talk to me a lot about what authentic leadership meant. And his description of something that is authentic is what lies between people. Now, whenever we relate with somebody, there's something between us, is there not, that we often don't talk about. When we meet somebody, we have an impression of them. We might know them well, so we think we know lots about them, or we might have heard about them if we haven't met them before. They might be totally new to us, and we're looking for clues. What is it that lies between me and this other person? And the sorts of things that we might want to lie in that space between us. We want somebody to be empathetic, to be kind to us, to think of us affectionately, to treat us with respect, to be honest, in as much as honesty is not always the best thing to do, but to be respectful. We want to trust them. And if you think at work, it's so important. So few of us are able to work in small organizations where we really only have to rely on ourselves. We always have to work with other people. So we're relating. And what we don't want in that space between us, we don't want to think that people are telling us lies, or they're manipulating us, or they're being unkind, they're treating us with contempt or laughing at us, that we don't trust them, that there is mistrust in that space. And when you are talking to somebody at work, or sending them a communication, or working with fellow students, think about what's between you. Because what you want, of course, is to work to a situation where you've got those sorts of things on the left-hand side. And the only way you really get to that is by talking about those with people, to talking about what lies between you, what you want from the relationship. And what we found, all the research that we've done over the years, particularly about trust, and I'm sure I don't have to tell you, you don't need research to find this out. Once trust is broken, once you stop trusting somebody, it takes an awful long time for you to rebuild that trust and to trust them again. And and finally, my third R is thinking about results. As I said, as a leader, what is it that we deliver? How do we want to be judged? How do we evidence our achievements? So when you start your work and you start your careers, immediately start thinking about, well, how will I be able to show that I've done a good job? What are the results that I want, the evidence that I want to be able to present? And that evidence should be much more objective than it's subjective. You want to be able to give facts and measurements, to be able to say, well, I know I've done a good job because I achieved X or Y, rather than, well, because I think I have, or because other people said I had. We want evidence of results. So I've included this slide here. This idea of evidence is, to me, is the difference between measuring something and guessing. So you measure something is the how many, how often questions, and the guessing is relying on anecdotes or generalizations, or just doing things because it's quick, not caring what the decision is, so it really doesn't matter. And this is the last two that I've included there, this idea of impression management. Sometimes when we're in situations with other people, we say things because we think somebody else wants us to say that, or because we want to support them, or we don't want to be in conflict with them. And that is a power play going on. So that, I would suggest, is probably the most difficult part of managing your career, whether you're managing the people that you work with or you're managing your boss. You have to balance that idea of, am I going along with a decision just because I think it looks good, or because that's what somebody wants me to hear? Or is it genuinely the best, the most informed decision? And I think whatever you decide about that, there's which way, whether you're going to support your boss on dubious data, for example, at least if you're being honest with yourself, you'll know what you're doing, because you've taken that moment to think about, well, what's really going on, and am I making a good decision here? So one of the ways that we make those good decisions, the ways that we deal with uncertainty, the way we deal with the reality of a situation where things have changed, is become called resilience. And I think you've probably heard about that. I'm going to be talking about resilience today because that's so much associated with adaptability. But here in the UK, there's a professor called Peter Clough at the University of Manchester Metropolitan University, and you've probably all heard of Manchester because of Manchester United and Manchester City. And he said, well, I'm not really happy with resilience. I prefer the expression mental toughness, because resilience to him or suggested this idea of just hanging in there, holding on for dear life and not having enough control of the situation that you find yourself in. And these ideas of knowing where you are in a situation, knowing that there's something you can do, have been very much associated with a growth mindset. So you might have heard of the expression, a growth mindset, that really actually came very much from work that was done in the United States with Carol Dweck and with athletes. And she found that your mental attitude was as important, if not more important, than your actual physical ability as an athlete. Your sense of whether you could control yourself, you could work hard, and you could deliver the results that you wanted. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So one of the things that a growth mindset enables you to make the most of is, firstly, believing that things can change. You rejected that idea of a leadership gene. You think, actually, no, I'm going to become adaptable. I'm going to develop my leadership capability because I can get better at all of these things. I've not been born with a leadership gene. If I work hard, I'll become successful. And if my attitude is one that believes in change, it believes in hard work delivering success, then I need that attitude. And one of the ways I will really develop that attitude is by seeing setbacks. And this is really where we need to adapt. When things don't go the way we want them to go, we have a setback and we think, a setback. This is a learning opportunity. And a student of mine from a few years ago got in touch recently, and I'd been running a workshop where we were all making cakes. And I was giving the instructions on Zoom, and everybody was making their cakes in their own kitchens. And there's this student who was trying to get her cake working in Poland. Her cakes went very badly wrong. And she said, she sent me a message saying, oh, my cakes didn't go so well, Kate. She said, but I saw that as fail, which was the first attempt in learning. And that is a great way to think about a setback. Your cake's not working as well as you'd want. It's not a failure. You're just learning how to do it better that time, the next time. But what we find that a lot of people have what's called a fixed mindset, which is the believers in the leadership gene. Oh, well, I haven't got a leadership gene. I'm never going to be able, get on in organizations or be a leader. That somehow that there's a right or wrong. So if people with a fixed mindset will be terribly judgmental, if you like, about the way that you do things. So you can see, if you think there's a right way of responding to a situation, you're not terribly adaptable, are you? And another thing a fixed mindset tends to reveal is people are very concerned about where they are relatively to others, as though everybody else has got a fixed level of ability, of intelligence. So where am I? Am I better? Who am I better than? and who am I not as good at, and feeling that that is outside of my control. So when we talk about resilience, we're drawing on the work of Peter Clough in Manchester, Carol's work in the States with the athletes, and these expressions, and another one that we hear quite a lot of is grit, which I'm not so keen on. That always makes me think of cowboys for some reason. But this idea of having a growth mindset is so important. So what I want to go through today is 8 steps to developing a resilient mindset. And I'm asking you a few questions. I hope if you'll be able to make a note of some of the questions, because all I would love to do today with you is to just give you some things to think about, because I would love all of you to think, yeah, I have a growth mindset. I am going to develop myself to be, terrific at work. And I've got 8 steps here and things I can think about in order to do it. And there is a guide that I'll tell you about at the end, which I'll send to anybody who wants it. Now, the first step, as I said, to knowing your reality is this idea of understanding yourself, self-awareness. And one of the things about leadership, because it involves relating, it's always about somebody else. It's never just about you, is it? But a great way of finding out what you're like and improving your self-awareness is to do loads of online personality tests that are free on the internet, or what sort of team player are you, or what sort of learning style do you have. I'm sure you've done already some of these as part of your studies. But do them, choose one. The longer the better, really. No, the 6 quick questions often isn't terribly insightful, but work with 1 or 2 others and ask them whether they think your results are an accurate reflection of you. I think the problem is if we just do these things by ourselves, if we don't like something, we can just say, well, that's not right. Or even worse, say, oh, that's just me and I'm always going to be like that. Or we'll just dismiss them as labeling or inaccurate. But what they do, they start a great conversation, and you start that process of gathering feedback, of being able to ask people about you, about the things you do. And instead of being defensive about that and arguing with them, you say, thank you for that. That's really interesting. So if you think about the sort of colleague that you want to be, the leader or manager you want to be, if somebody can come to you and say, okay, I really don't like it when you do that, or that makes me feel, you don't trust me, instead of me saying, well, I shouldn't. You shouldn't feel like that because I do trust you. You say, well, I'm sorry about that. What can I do to make you feel trusted next time? So don't be defensive, be accepting. And one of the ways you start practicing this is asking other people, well, is that me or isn't that me? And one of the really nice things about doing this sort of exercise with people you trust and whose opinion you value is that you get hidden wins. You'll get people telling you great things about yourself that you didn't even know. And that's a boost for your self-confidence, but also contributes to that idea of being self-aware. So you never know yourself, because we've got too many unconscious things going on, as the psychologist Freud would tell us. But we can get better. We can start understanding ourselves a bit better, and every day know what it is that provokes the sorts of reactions that we get. Number 2, second step, take care of your mental health. I don't know how it's been for you in India, but certainly in the UK during the first lockdown, there were real impacts on people's mental health, particularly amongst young people. And I know you have a much younger population than we do, because they were isolated. They weren't going into work to see their colleagues. Maybe they were living by themselves, not living with family. And we know that poor mental health, which can be exacerbated certainly by work, then leads to much more serious conditions, to burnout, and people actually opting out of the workforce altogether. So you have to look after your mental health. And one of the ways that we talk about managing your mental health, keeping yourself mentally well, is to think about your work-life balance. And there are two views on this, and it's a pity that we're not all in the same room and I can ask for hands up because it'd take me too long to count them on Zoom. But which of these do you believe? Do you believe that you can have a harmonious interface between different domains of your life? That's your work and your family and your hobbies and your health, etc. Or do you agree with the Harvard assessment from 2014 that actually work-life balance is a complete myth at its worst? So in order for you to sort of think about your work-life balance, I think you actually have to first say, well, do I agree with Harvard? Can I have it all? Can I have a successful professional life and a successful family life? And I hope that you all say the answer to that is yes. And if I've accepted that, yes, I can do that, I'm not agreeing that it's a myth. I think there are things I can do to balance my life and look after my mental health. Is that either sharing out finite resources, and that invariably when we come to work-life balance means time, or is it generating more resources? Now, I've included that quote there because it's one I particularly like about the importance of balance and the importance of harmony. Because if you get your life out of balance, you do too much work or you do too much life, then actually you won't be in harmony and you won't be successful, because you're not successful, are you, if only one part of your life is successful? So let's think about what that means. Now, if you're of the school of thought that thinks, actually, I have limited resources, which is time, and I will share those out. People who are good at this are great boundary managers. So they know they've got so many hours in a week and they will allocate certain number of hours to certain activities. And what they do is very well and zealously manage their boundaries. So they will be people who turn their computer off at the end of the working day. They don't answer work emails during their leisure time. They make sure that they go to their gym. They don't put it off. They're very, very good. They're disciplined and they manage their boundaries. Now, other people have a more fluid look, fluid approach, The resource generation view says, well, actually, if you get your life in balance, you can have crossover benefits. Of course, you can't create more hours, but what you can do is give more energy or learn from one area of your life. So you've got a happy family life. You're good at relating. You've got satisfying paid work, so you don't have any economic worry. Heard of these on your course, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the things he really emphasizes is for you to think about what you can control, what you can influence. And if you can't control or influence something, stop thinking about it. Let it go. So there's loads of things. You can control what you read. You can control who your friends are. You can, large extent, control your place of work. You control how you manage your work-life balance. Concentrate on those things. But the things you have no influence or control over, think about, draw the circles, fill in the various things. I think I got some examples here of the things you can and that you can't control, and forget the things that might concern you, but you can't do anything about. So what is it worth focusing on? Another thing step 5, if you like, in building your support networks is to think about where you get your support from at the moment. And I think sometimes we're probably surprised when we write down all the people that do give us support and help, and all the places that we can go, from our fellow students, from our family, of course, from our friends, and also mentors. Do we have a mentor? Which is somebody who understands the situation that you're in? A lot of colleges, I don't know, Dr. Thomas hasn't told me whether you have a mentoring program at your college, but there is a lot of help and support out there. And if you write down all the people that help and support you, and find that it's not as long a list as you'd like it to be, you can start thinking about, well, how do I extend that list? Get some new hobbies, join something that's a bit more social, and meet some other people. Because often people like to help. They really do like to help and encourage. So I think mentors are a terrific thing for young people, and not just for you to get, the benefit from them, but also it's great being a mentor. You really learn so much. I'm a mentor for a homeless charity in London, and I see my mentees, and I learn loads from them as well. So mentoring, people might be grateful to give you help, because in helping you, you're helping them. Now, this is another thing that depends very much on your personality, and I think I'd like you to spend a couple of seconds thinking about how much you like planning. If you like planning and writing to-do lists and knowing what you're going to be doing, for the next few years, as my diagram shows, then you will probably find friends and family who don't make plans upset you. You think they're disorganized and they're irritating, and they just are chaotic in the way they're approaching their life. And that, I think, is very much a feature of your personality. And I always find it really interesting. I do like planning, but my older daughter likes planning so much that she thinks that I'm disorganized. Whereas I think compared to a lot of people, I love a plan. And that it always amuses me. But again, it's one of those things that if you know that about yourself, you can adjust accordingly. Because I don't think you can be serious about having a successful, well-balanced life, getting on in an organization, if you don't have some sort of idea about where you're going. Because I think planning is developing that grit that I referred to earlier on. It's that keeping on, becoming stronger with every setback. And it's understanding, it's a sort of combination of all the things I've been talking about, really. That understanding what drives you in life, what is it that you want to achieve? What is your philosophy? And to never lose sight of that. And I think going back to what I was saying about when you're making decisions and you have to make those difficult choices between supporting a colleague or your boss, you have to know what's right for you and what drives you and what keeps you going, what keeps you pleased with yourself. What is it that you want to achieve? Again, work-life balance. What's important to you there? Have some goals. And although, as I said, some people don't like plans and resist planning, but you need simple goals along the way to whatever your big goal is. And we often hear about athletes, but we did some research a few years ago looking particularly at Olympians and people who'd won gold medals. And they all said, you don't set out to win a gold medal. What you set out to do is get a little bit better at all the things you need to be better at. And then incrementally, you will get much better. And that idea of incremental gains came very much from, I think from cycling. Getting a little half a second faster and changing the saddles and making sure that you have an extra 10 minutes sleep, whatever was needed incrementally. And unless you know what it is you're trying to achieve, unless you know what your little goals are, you won't develop the habits that mean that they become second nature to you. And one of the things that I haven't mentioned about, but I think it's worth mentioning for a few minutes, is the idea of that voice inside ourselves that tells us what we can't do, that it does, it's not worth trying. We're never going to be good enough. And going right back to that idea of a growth mindset and the leadership gene, if your inner critic is the voice of the fixed mindset, that's the voice that's telling you not to bother, to give up, to not set goals, not to have your big goal at the in sight, but to give up. So how would you go about, what are the experiences that you would really think you need to do in order to develop, to expand your growth mindset, to develop a growth mindset? So one of the things I often think it's useful to do here is to think of something you'd hate to do. Think of things you love to do, and then that will tell you usually where your comfort zone is, because your comfort zone tends to be doing things you love to do and not doing things you hate to do. Now, over the years, lots of students have told me about the things that they hate doing, and one thing that I've heard a lot is presenting, public speaking. And what happens, I don't know whether that applies to everybody here. I think that's becoming less of a thing because we get so many more opportunities to do it now. But if you are one of those people who think, oh, I really don't enjoy presenting, what you tend to do is either avoid opportunities to do it or try and do it, get it over and done with as quickly as possible. But what you don't do is actually think, I'm going to learn to love this. And it's the learning to love things that you hate that really help you expand your comfort zone. There was a book written called The Tools about people, two American psychologists, and they identified one tool that they called reversal of desire. And that was for you to tell yourself the things that you hate that you love. Because we can trick our minds. So I think, could you all, as part of today's activities, think about this. What is it you hate to do? What do you love to do? And how are you going to make yourself love some of the things that you hate? What are the things that you're going to have to engage with in order to do that? Another step in the road to being really resilience is actually getting very good at focusing on something. And we've heard so much about multitasking in the past few years and how it's possible to do 2 or 3 things at once. And we've even heard, I don't know how much you've heard in India, but apparently women are better at multitasking than men. But we also have heard a lot about mindfulness, and I'm sure that's something that you're all familiar with. And one of the underlying principles of mindfulness is that you don't multitask. You are present in the moment and doing what it is you should be doing, and only that. Because all the studies have shown that we can't really multitask. All we do is switch from one task to another, and we lose valuable time, going back to our resource-based view of work-life balance, in the switching, because we don't get that up to speed. It's a bit like having your tyres changed in a Formula One race. You lose time, and you have to get back up to speed again. But we often can't focus. We put things off for really good reasons. And going back to the book I mentioned about the tools, we sometimes are not focusing because we're protecting ourselves from usually a negative emotion. So we won't get down to do the assignment we're meant to be doing, or we won't get down to do our exam revision because we're worried about not doing it well, or we're worried it's going to take us a long time, or we're worried because we're going to fail. So by not starting, we're actually saving ourselves from feeling anxious or distressed about something. So if you are putting yourself something off, you're not focusing on something that you know you have to do. Say, well, why am I not doing this? And you might be really interested in the answer you give yourself. You might find because it's not really important, or you might find it's because you really don't want to do it, or you think you're going to be unsuccessful, or you don't think it's fair that you've been asked to do it. And if you tell yourself that you work better at the last minute, I think that's back into the, deluding yourself. What you're really doing is you're putting off having the negative emotion until the very last minute, so you can experience it for the least amount of time. But we can't stay focused for very long, because our, human brains are not supposed to stay. And sometimes we get in that place, that you've heard about, in the zone, where we're so wrapped up in what we're doing. But on the whole, most people can only really, stay focused for 3 or 4 hours a day. And one of the things that the picture here is to use, that's a real help, is this egg timer. And this lasts 25 minutes. And I think that that's a great amount of time to be able to stay focused. And if you do your 25 minutes, then you've got 5 minutes to reward yourself. So for the last couple of minutes, I'd like to think about how we go about practicing those 7 steps that I've talked about becoming more resilient. And I think the only way that you really can begin to practice is to start writing down some of the things we've talked about. Do the personality tests. Do think about work-life balance. How do you carve up? How do you share out your time? Are there parts on whether it's your domains, the energy creating one, or whether it's the resource allocation one, are there things missing? Don't you have enough hobbies? Do you not spend enough time doing your studies? Maybe you could volunteer. Maybe you could get some part-time work. How are you going to fit your pie into one that's got a domain for everything? Because even if you then become a very good boundary manager, you can still get the benefits of actually those crossover benefits I talked about. So think about your work-life balance. Again, please write down your plans and your goals. And even if you're not, as I say, I totally understand those people who aren't very big planners, but actually writing down your big goals only takes a couple of minutes. And once you've written something down, it not only does it become a bit more real, but often it becomes a bit more manageable. Going back to the idea of becoming better at something, you don't say, I want to be a world-class dancer. You practice your fitness and your strength and the different steps and the different sorts of dances as part of the journey. So what is it you want from life? And what are the little steps that might get you there? And start writing them down. Practice, as I said, use any tricks you can for focusing the egg timer or whatever it takes. But to me, the best resource that we all have are the people around us who want us to do well, who are interested in us doing well, so we can build those relationships that are based on trust, going back to my picture, what lies between us, and really take advantage of the network of friends and family that we have. And look for those mentors, look for people that you can speak to locally or doing the sorts of jobs that you would like to be doing. And as I say, it is very much a two-way relationship. So I'm very mindful of, not wanting to talk for too long. So what I would like to do, I don't know if anybody has any questions or Dr. Thomas has any questions. If you'd like to have copies of the slides or a booklet that we developed while I was at the Institute, which is much more about being resilient and developing resilience at work, add me on LinkedIn and I will send that to you. And never give up on your goals. I'm waiting patiently here for some questions. Don't worry if you haven't any. I've given you a lot of information. I accept that. but often I don't know where Dr. Thomas is.
Yes.
So I can't see
Kate,
anybody's faces.
Yes. Kate, I have a question.
Oh, lovely.
Yes. In India, it is always said that we have to be, we are counted as efficient if we are good in multitasking. You know, this word multitasking is a buzzword here. But I strongly believe we cannot serve two masters at a time. And you rightly said it. So I am assured now the point that which I believed, you have said it. So I'm so happy for that.
And please, well, I don't think you can account for the popularity of mindfulness and all the mindfulness courses if there is strong evidence for, and you know, plenty of research that shows you multitasking not efficient.
Yes. One thing at a time we can do. Yes, I agree. And I like that idea of having this hourglass, like it is for 25 minutes. So keep it there, keep focused, and give yourself a 5-minute break, treat. So I like that idea.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a brilliant one.
Yes, it's a brilliant idea, Kate. In fact, students can take it as a, you know, a good takeaway point. So when you are focusing on your studies, study for 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break, right, Kate?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously I've got the old fashioned, but you can put them on your phone. Okay. You don't have to carry the hourglass around with you.
Absolutely. So students, please ask your questions. Ms. Kate will be happy to clear your doubts. So Ananya, no doubts, class?
Yeah, ma'am.
Yes, please ask.
Oh dear, I hope I haven't overwhelmed people with information so that, or maybe I've answered all the questions.
The students actually, they themselves have selected this theme, Kate.
Well, I think it's a fantastic theme, particularly because there's so much you can do about getting better at adjusting yourself, the way you adapt to situations. And please never think that, you know, you're a finished article. You're not finished at 16, 18, 22 or, you know, 52. You are still somebody who can keep learning and keep getting better.
Absolutely. Is Neelam, you have a question?
Ms. Kate, will you please suggest what kind of personality test we can undergo?
Right, the most famous one, it was certainly in here in the UK and the US, is Myers-Briggs, the MBTI. Now you're supposed to pay to do that test, but there are a lot of tests that are free that will give you the similar sort of results. So what Myers-Briggs tells you about yourselves is whether you tend to be more extroverted, whether you get your energy from other people, or introverted, whether you get your energy from yourself, as it were. It tells you how you like to plan, you know, whether you like big picture or whether you like detailed, how you make decisions, whether you like to make them intuitively or you like to rely on facts, etc. And so there are 4 different dimensions which end up with 16 different personality types, because we can all be E or I or N or S. And what I find all of these things do, they're great things to do with your friends, with your college fellow students, but it's not like you should be extrovert or you should be introvert, for example. There isn't a right or a wrong. There isn't a better or a worse. And what it does, it helps us understand difference without being judgmental or critical. So I'm an extrovert. I like talking to other people. If I'm feeling tired or low on energy, I'll go and look for other people to talk to. One of my daughters is an introvert. If she gets low on energy, she has to be by herself. Now, it would be wrong if I tried to and make her talk to me, say, no, you'll get more energetic by talking to me, when absolutely that's the wrong thing to do. So it's understanding why people need different things. And that really, to me, is the big benefit of personality tests. Another one that's very good is the sort of person, the sort of team role you like, because when we work, we all end up working in teams of some sort, or groups of other people. And it's nice to find out what you like to be in a team. So do you like to be the person that's jollying everybody along? Or do you like to be the person who just gets on with the job? Do you like to be the person who likes to know what's going on in other teams? This is because we'll all have ways we prefer to behave. And just getting an insight in what those are makes us understand people not like us a bit better. So anything that gives you a bit of an insight into what you're like, if you're doing it and talking to somebody else, is such a great way of becoming less judgmental and more understanding about the people that we need to relate with.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question.
Anybody else, students? Marciana?
I would like, if nobody has a question, I don't know if you can ask about this later, Dr. Thomas, but I would like to know how many people believe in the leadership gene. How many people here, the students today, actually think, oh, there's nothing I can do, I haven't been born with it, or even worse, I have been born with the leadership gene, so I'm destined for greatness. Because I think that's, it's so persistent and it's so limiting. But as I say, it persists, it won't go away. So it's an interesting one for me, because it's this great man theory of leadership that's been around for a long time. And I think we all know people who are great in one place and not great in another. And there's so many things that you need to be good at as a leader. I think you can only do that by keeping learning and keeping on working.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah. You know, as it says here on my last slide, never give up on your goals, because you're always going to have to working. And if you achieve them, set some more.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Believe us, Kate, this masterminds, the Commerce Association of a college, where we are giving a platform for the students to upskill themselves, okay? We are allowing them, we are mentoring them to become future leaders. So they take up a lot of leadership activities, the way they arrange the events, they do networking, and especially this remote working time. We all are now isolated in our homes, but yet we are able to get our students into this platform. It itself is a great achievement.
It certainly is. And it's such a good example there of adapting.
So our students are looking forward for this kind of webinars where they are exposed to international, happenings, exposure. So this is really helping them. So any student who wants to ask any doubts, or you can just share your experiences, you're most welcome.
Well, maybe people are out of their comfort zone, Rebecca, contributing to such a big audience. And I always think when something like this, there's a lot of people on Zoom calls and the Zoom camera goes straight on you. It can be quite overwhelming, but it does sound from what you're doing that you're already, everyone here is well on their 8 steps to developing a resilience. Especially with your mentoring program and everything, it sounds fascinating. Well, you're all very lucky to be at such a good college.
Yes. So can we have vote of thanks now? Yogita?
Yeah, sure, ma'am.
Forward to vote of thanks, I would request
Oh.
all the participants to fill the feedback form. And once you fill this form,
Can you be louder? Can you be louder, Marciana?
Ma'am, Neela ma'am is speaking.
Be louder.
Yes, ma'am.
Marciana, you don't have any question or anything to share with Miss Kate? Yes?
Sorry
You're
to
not audible.
interrupt, ma'am.
Not audible, Marciana.
Hello.
Yeah.
Sorry
Aditi,
to
yes.
interrupt, ma'am, but I want to share some experience with Miss Kate. Is we see in the all the steps which we should to follow for achieve our goals, but in reality we are not able to do so. Why it is happens?
Very good question.
So sorry, can you give me sort of an example maybe of rather than a goal that you think you haven't, the reality is that you haven't been able to achieve it or it's not possible?
Aditi, can you give me a real life example?
Yes, we like an example.
Yeah, sure, ma'am. I make a plan, but I didn't able to follow the schedules.
Oh, I would think probably you're being too ambitious in what you're trying to achieve on your schedule. And I think the smaller you can, that's why I use the hourglass in 25 minutes. The smaller you can make your goals, the more likely that you are to achieve them. And how achieving a goal is so motivating. I've noticed in the chat, somebody's asked about motivation. And there's nothing in my experience that motivates like success. Unless you're one of the few people who get motivated by, by punishment. But on the whole, if we're successful, it cheers us up, it gives us an energy boost, and we'll set ourselves another goal. So if you're finding that you're not achieving your goals, you're being too hard on yourself, or you're setting too big goals and making it too difficult, and you're not rewarding yourself by succeeding. And I think that's the thing. I think, remember the slide I did there about silencing your inner critic? Well, I think your inner critic is being too hard and making you set too difficult goals.
Aditi? Yes, there's one more question.
Right.
Shambhavi, can you ask directly or you want me to read the message? She's asking a question, what values are more important for a leader?
I think one of the most important values is having integrity. Because if you have integrity, which essentially means that you'll behave the same wherever you are, people will trust you and rely on you to do the right thing. And that means that you can't, I don't think, you hear people say that they're a different person at work to that they are in their family. Well, that to me isn't integrity. If you have integrity, there's a consistency about you. You know what you believe in, and you are that person in whichever domain that you're in. And it's, sometimes we compromise, we have to make difficult decisions. But as I said, if you know what you believe in and you know your tolerance levels for being compromised, you have a control over your life that you won't have if you just sort of go with the wind and change what you believe in to the situation you're in. So work on what do you believe in and being consistent with that over all the domains of your life. And also, I think it's very important for a leader to have a sense of humour. I just add that. Don't take yourself too seriously.
That's right. So any more questions, students? So can we have the vote of thanks, formal vote of thanks? Marciana?
Yogita, you're there in the meeting, right?
Yeah. Okay. Good evening. This seminar has been a great success so far as it imparted a lot of knowledge to all of us. I, on behalf of my team, Masterminds, would like to deliver the vote of thanks. I want to thank our guest speaker, Dr. Kate Cooper. You truly made this day full of knowledge for us. Your deep and intellectual way of imparting knowledge has added to the glory of this webinar. Today, we have got a lot of information which will truly help us in our life. We have no words to offer gratitude for your valuable presence in this webinar. You gave an insight into the topic and revealed some interesting facts. It was an informative webinar in true sense. I am sure that precious knowledge you gave us will definitely help us in our lives. A big thank you to our event heads, Mr. Yash Thakur and Monu Singh. Last but not the least, I thank all the students for attending this webinar.
Thank you. That was a lovely vote of thanks. And absolutely, please, thank you all for listening to me today. The pleasure has been absolutely mine talking to you. I just love the idea. I'm talking to you all in India from Suffolk in England. And thank you so much for inviting me.
Kate, same here. We wish to have continued support from you. Students would love to hear from you. Isn't it, students?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So, let's be connected, Kate. Let's have more kind of webinars which will really mold them to be better personalities so that they become successful in their life.
Well, this is a great place to start. Never give up on your goals. So thank you very much, as I say, for inviting me. And I hope to see you well. I hope you all see me again soon because I can't see very many of you.
All of you, please keep your cameras on and show your face to Miss Kate. Please. It's a request from her. So please keep your cameras on. Sushmita Singh, Shambhavi, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Keep your cameras on. Sushmita, Arya, Ananya.
No, I'm losing everybody. Oh, that's much better. Thank you. Oh, that's good. I love it when there's two in a photo, in a Zoom.
Thank you so much for motivating us.
Oh,
Thank you, ma'am.
well, thank you, ma'am. And happy
Thank you so
Christmas.
much,
I don't know how seriously you take Christmas, but I hope you take it very seriously and as much as have a great time.
Yes, we do celebrate Christmas here. We celebrate Diwali, we celebrate Christmas, we celebrate Eid, we celebrate New Year. India is a multicultural, multi-religious country, so it's really colorful here. You should visit India, Kate.
I think I will,
Yes.
especially around Christmas time. Or it sounds to me like you just like any excuse for a party.
Yes, in fact, you may say Mumbai, when you look at Mumbai, the main city, it looks more like London.
I love London, so I will no doubt love Mumbai. And I'm pleased to hear that because I always think sometimes, especially the US, they don't celebrate Christmas for anywhere near the length of time we do here. We just, we do take the whole celebration.
You can see during Christmas time, you can see people wearing those red hats and wishing each other. That happens. It's a lovely time.
Okay.
So Merry Christmas to you, Kate.
And to all of you. Okay. Goodbye then. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye,
ma'am. Thank you.
ma'am.
Bye, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Bye, Kate. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. So shall I end the meet?
1 second, ma'am. To all the participants, the link have been sent. So you have to fill the feedback form, and then again you have to fill the certificate form. So once you're done with that, your certificates will be generated automatically and you will receive it in your email IDs. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
ma'am.
Rebecca ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.